of the things I wanted to talk about was somehow, what it's going to end up being is a sort of story about my life. I want, we've done this, I'm sure, around Tree Ratner, where you talk in terms of archetypes and myths. So I wanted to do that. And the reason I wanted to do that was because for me, talking about myths is somehow trying to see the deeper thread of what's going on through our lives, deeper meaning. But also I wanted to highlight that I think one of my experiences as a practitioner or a Buddhist, as a dad, just in general, just as a human being, is you get these kind of conflicts happening, so it's like you want to do one thing, but life is demanding another thing, and so on. And so there's this kind of play of energies or forces which can sometimes be quite uncomfortable. So I'm hoping that will come out to a certain extent through this short presentation. So I've come up with five phases of my life, and I've been thinking, like, I woke up this morning and I had quite a lot of emotion in relation to being a dad in Tree Ratner, and a bit of me was like ranting, about, Tree Ratner says this and Tree Ratner says that, and I just thought, oh gosh, that would not go down well at all, but I think it's something I probably need to reflect on, and it might be more to do with my, I've got quite a strong, inner rage in my character, so that was probably bubbling out of there, if I'm really honest. But that's another story. Fortunately. So I wanted to bring out relevant qualities and attributes, if you like, from each phase. And the other thing that I was thinking this morning when I woke up is I somehow have worked out I can look back over 5 decades, which seems ridiculous because I'm only just into my 5th decade. But yeah, I've got an image for each from my 10s, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and I'm now beginning my 50s. So I'm going to talk about the child, or the fool is the archetype, if you like, or the myth. I'm going to talk about the aspirant, the seeker. I'm going to talk about the traveler, or the troubadour. I'm going to talk about the practitioner, and I'm going to talk about the guardian, which is perhaps the most relevant to being a dad, I would say. Yeah, obviously it's a kind of personal journey, but I'm hoping that it'll resonate with some of you in terms of your own experience. So, I'm thinking back. So I was born in 1970. So I'm just taking my mind back to, from sort of age 10 up to 18, basically my late teens. So childhood. And I think that phase for me was very much about, I've called it the fool, but I'm calling it the fool because I think there's, in the sense of not knowing. So there's this phase in our lives where we're not really knowing, or trying to make sense of the world. So it's characterized by wonder, not knowing, you could say ignorance, and maybe that this quality of awe, or awe, and beginning a search. So in my teens I started to question the kind of society we were living in, and also touching into quite dark spaces in this time. So there was I'm sure you've come across this work of Robert Bly. It was kind of popular in the 90s in Tree Ratner, but it's relevant stuff, I think. Robert Bly talks about the ashes, and I think it's, I had a phase where I was just quite in my late teens, where basically I was out of it, on some level. I was smoking a lot of hashish, which was popular at the time, and that was just quite a dark period. Actually, it was an important period because it really bounced me into looking for a more a path based on light and something more expansive, because I got into quite a dark space, like nihilistic space, I would say, around the age of 18, 19, 20, with a little bit of like insanity thrown in, just a little touch of insanity. So fortunately then came my 20s, and when I was 20, I learned to meditate. So I really cut my, hedonistic dynamics that I was getting into very strongly. It was like a very like before and after. It was a very kind of black and white decision. Unfortunately, I learned to meditate with an order member who was living in Leeds at the time. I was living in Leeds. And what began is what I call the phase of the aspirant or the trainee or the apprentice. So I had quite a long period, really up until ordination. So we're talking about like 11 years from the age of 20 to 31, where I did a lot of training. And it was the 90s. I'd say Triratna was in this phase of an expansive phase. Maybe you could even call it triumphant. There was the emphasis on community living, working in teams, center. I in many ways had a really good time during that period. I worked within Windhorse for a while. We ran a shop. I was in the ordination process, which I'm sure it still is. It's like, you go into Pamaloka twice a year. I was going on retreat to Vajraloka to meditate. Yeah. And so the other thing that happened during that time for me as a trainee or as the apprentice was training up as a yoga teacher. So I'd actually had my background was more engineering, weirdly enough, but I got really into yoga from my late teens onwards. And what I decided I wanted to do was really get into yoga. So I just did some trainings. I did some serious trainings during that time with the Iyengar Institute and with some other teachers. And then as Sangaji, so that was like the aspirant phase. I suppose the quality there is one of, it's like discipline, single-mindedness, being receptive. Those are the kind of qualities that were important during that time. Being open, being a disciple, we could say. And I'd say these qualities, it's not like they just stop, they're still there. So then came the third phase. So as Sangaji mentioned, I got ordained in 2001. And I suppose I've always been a bit restless. One of my character traits is restlessness. It's in my name, actually. Sudaka. Daka is a reference to Dakini, as in the sky dancer. So one of the things Surya said to me is, well, you like to move around a lot, he was kind of joking, but there was a point there. And so I got to 2002, I just got ordained. It was quite a difficult time, actually, for a lot of us, because there was this whole business of Bhante and his relationships with his stories within the order. That was all going on. It was a difficult time for me, actually. But I also had a really strong desire to just get out into the world. So on one of my yoga trainings, I met a woman from Istanbul who had a center in Istanbul in Turkey, where now Vajrachakshu is living and teaching amazingly. But she said to me, why don't you come and teach in my center? And, I'd kind of come to the end of this period of, as it were, of the apprentice. I was in my early 30s. Still, I wasn't definitely not thinking about having kids at that time. And I just said, yeah, I'm off, So I literally packed up, gave a lot of stuff away, got a one-way ticket to Istanbul and started teaching in her center. But at that time, I also met a woman from Barcelona. So there was definitely, that was like a pull. So I was doing this very mad life of flying between Istanbul and Barcelona for a couple of years, for a year. It didn't work at all. And I decided to move to Barcelona. So that's when I started living in Spain. But for the first few years living in Spain, I was basically earning a living by traveling. I was flying somewhere, teaching, flying back, living cheaply in Spain, flying off again. So this phase I consider as like the wanderer or the traveler. I suppose I was trying to live out the myth of the yogi, but it's got its flaws. It's like it was like a really awful carbon footprint. It was ridiculous flying on these budget flights to Finland or Estonia or whatever, back to Istanbul to teach. But it was an interesting phase of meeting people. I think my memory of that time is very much one of exploration, moving around, getting to know different peoples, and wanting to teach. Wanting to teach yoga, wanting to be in places as a Buddhist as well, and teach meditation, teach mindfulness. During that time, I also did a pilgrimage to India, which was a really important trip, actually. I went to Bodh Gaya, that first trip to India. And I also learned to another skill. So I was still in this kind of learning phase. I think we always are. So I learned how to do Thai massage, which is, it's been a really important source of income for me over the years. And then came a more settled period. So I consider this I call this the practitioner. During this period, so it's the period that Sangajit was describing, I was in Valencia. I'd moved to Valencia 2007. Really up until last year, I was in the city. Basically, I suppose that's 12, 13 years. I'm just getting into a routine of teaching regular classes, establishing classes, working with the Buddhist Center, teaching meditation, being in a chapter in Valencia, and beginning to take on more sort of serious responsibility for quite the latter period of that. I was the Mitra convener in Valencia, working with the chair very closely, the previous chair, and we bought this property during that time. So it was, I never felt like there was a really weighty responsibility somehow in the Buddhist Center, but I guess there was, or there is, a sense of taking on responsibility. So that took me up to like last year, and then we've had this crisis coming into the last phase, which is still quite new. As Sangajit says, I've only been here really a year. I kind of think of it as a temporary period, which I'm hoping will last 3, 4, 5 years. On Friday last week, I took on becoming like the legal president of the charity which runs the retreat center, which would be the equivalent of the chair. The joke is that it's just me, it's just me in the retreat center. I work with a very close friend called Sarita. So I'm not really directing anything as such, or chairing anything as such. It's a very small situation on one level, basically caretaking. So the archetype that comes up for me is the guardian, and I think that's the one that's perhaps the most relevant to being a father as well. So the guardian is the person that takes care. In relation to the retreat center, it's the person who coordinates. We make this joke, el presidente. Legally I'm responsible for the place. And I'm the main person in terms of as in terms of receiving guests and so on. And I think what comes, the qualities that come up for me of that image of the guardian is just, it really is about taking care. And I can see that as a parent, that is one of the main things that I'm thinking that is my job as a parent, is creating a space whereby my kids, or Ruben is not exactly my kid, but effectively is, because my wife's first son. It's just creating a space where they can be safe and be in a rich environment where they can learn, basically, and grow up and get skilled up to be independent. That's the way I think about it, as the parent guardian. It was very interesting, actually, taking on becoming the father to Ruben, because Ruben has a really present father. His father's really present. In fact, he lives, like I say, our immediate neighbor to the retreat center is Ruben's father. So I was trying to work out, what is my role in relationship to Ruben? So I was coming up with all sorts of images. I'm the kind of godfather, El Padrino, or am I his second father? I'm his uncle. He calls me my second father. So, but the main responsibility clearly falls with his own father. So, yeah. I think one of the other qualities that for me comes up with the guardian is the sense of creating what we say in Spanish is hogar, which is like a home. It's like creating a home. And I think for me, it does really resonate with the retreat center project, because we're trying to create a spiritual home for people to come into and to practice in. In fact, somebody this summer put up the famous Rumi poem, The Guest House, which you're probably aware of. I definitely see the retreat center as a guest house in a spiritual sense, and I'm just in a sense another guest here. In fact, when retreats are on, we have to go off to a nearby. We've got use of a house nearby where we can be as a family. Okay, so those are the 5 myths that have come out of my life over the last 5 decades. So it's like the fool, the not knowing, which is, I think, a quality we do need to stay in touch with, actually, of just being open and not knowing, being full of wonder. Then there's the seeker, or the aspirant, or the trainee. So that's the energy of actually committing to doing some training, the discipline. There's this phase which I call the troubadour, which is one of basically getting out into the world and moving around. There's the phase of the the practitioner, which is somehow to do for me with creating a sense of stability and routine, and just getting on with it, getting on with the practices, getting on with the job. And then there's this quality of the guardian, which is, the caretaker, the one, or the guardian also protects, creating a spiritual home, but also creating a home, as it were, a more samsaric home, where the kids can grow up. That is our job. So thank you very much. Hopefully that was a not too fast. God, I don't know how long, that's probably long enough, actually. It's 8:30 now where you are. Thank you very much.